It's our pleasure to have him with us tonight. May I bring up Dr. Adil Najam.
Thank you, and my apologies for having to sit through that bio. We academic types write those boring things, and I have to apologize for that. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's a great pleasure always to be in Chicago. It's a great pleasure to speak at HDF. It's a particularly great pleasure to be here, not just because of the ambience, but because I think a new generation of people are getting active in the HDF movement. And for those of us who've been following HDF for a long time, that is a great sign of maturity and prosperity of the idea that is HDF. I don't want to take too much time. I stand between you and your dinner. I want to very quickly go through a few things about the floods. And I imagine that if you are in this room right now, you know that there was a flood. I imagine that if you are in this room right now, you not only know that there was a flood, you know the extent of it. I imagine that if you are in this room right now, you also feel for the calamity that happened. I essentially am going to raise a few questions and maybe leave us with something to talk about and think about as we have our dinner. This is going to be a little sort of by movement because I don't have the controls of the slides myself, but I would encourage you to look at the screen rather than me. The screen looks better than I ever will, I promise you. I was trained as an engineer, so I want to talk about numbers. And this is really a calamity that can be talked about in numbers. And I want to talk about numbers not just to repeat the numbers that you've heard, but to raise three questions about the numbers that you've been hearing about. I promise not to answer any of these questions because then we'll have nothing to talk about. But the questions are important. The first question I want to raise about the numbers that we've been hearing about the floods is that why do some numbers move our humanity more than other numbers? And if you've been following disasters across the world over the last year, as many of us have, that is a question that we should all think about. And do not worry, I'm not going to get into the silliness of this disaster is bigger than that, because I really don't think that is the way to think about this. That does not behoove us, because one person dead somewhere is one person too many to have died. And those numbers don't count. But we should think about why do some numbers move us more than others, and that's the first question. The second question I want to raise in the next 5 minutes or so is, why do some numbers numb us, absolutely numb us, into an awe-inspired inaction? We are so awed by those numbers that we just freeze. And that is really the numbers of these floods. And the third question that I want to raise in the few minutes that I have is, what is the single most important number that can define what we are here about today? So if I can go through that very, very quickly, and with the first of that numbers, and I'll respond to those questions in a slightly different order. But if we can go very quickly through some of these numbers, I hope you can see the screen. This is a map of Pakistan. I want to put into context, even for Pakistanis in the room, what this flood meant. I'm amongst other things a professor of geography, so I like maps. The blue area, the dark and light blue, is the area that was affected by the floods. That area is 20% of all of Pakistan. What does 20% of Pakistan means? If any of you have been to England, that is more area than all of England. If any of you have been to Bangladesh, that is more area than all of Bangladesh. If any of you have been to many other countries, that's more area than more than 100 different countries. But look at that blue thing and let's put it in some other perspective. And again, I wish we had a bigger screen, but focus on this map. I've taken that same flood area and superimposed it on a map of the US to give you a sense of what that meant. That flood would have covered, in the US context, this is only for comparison, from the border with Canada and Vermont down to Florida. That's the magnitude. If you can remember Katrina, think Katrina from the Canadian border down to Florida. If I can put it in another context, the same area that we were talking about, superimposed on the map of Japan, more than the entire area. The same area, if we can go to the next one, superimposed on the map of Europe. Starting from Denmark on the north, down to Spain. That's the extent of what we are talking about. And this was the issue about what is it that numbs us about some of these numbers. If you can go to the next one, what that means. What does 20% of Pakistan means? If you want to understand Pakistan, understand the Indus. The Indus is what Pakistan is about. What that means is that 1 out of every 9 Pakistanis are affected by this flood. And here is really this mind-numbing question that I really come to you with. It amazes me that our humanity, and this is not just about Pakistan, we've seen this in many disasters. Our humanity is invoked more when we cannot do anything than it is when we can actually make a difference. When we hear news of lots of people dying, we are immediately moved into action, even though our actions cannot help those who have died. And yet, and this is the development challenge all over the world, when there are people whose lives can actually be affected by what we do, we sit. And this is not just true about Pakistan today, this is true about Haiti today. That our humanity drives up much more when we can actually make a difference. And I realize that's an uncomfortable thought, but it's a thought worth thinking about. What does 1 out of 9 Pakistanis mean? That means more people than all the Dutch in Netherlands. That means more Swiss. More people than all the Swiss in Switzerland. That means more people than the entire population of 150 countries. That's the extent. That's the mind-numbing extent of this. And when you think about the mind-numbing, and different people have different numbers, my estimates I'm using puts it at 22 million. You can have 20, you can have 18, you can have 10, 1 million. 5 people would be too many. That number doesn't matter, but what matters is there are people who can be helped, there are people whose lives can be changed because of what we do. But the most important thing, and I think this is really what we have here about, that of those people, the organizers here have the number of 10 million, other sources put it at 15 million. 15 million children affected, let it be named, by a calamity. And when you think of this number, you suddenly numb. If there are 15 million, I can do nothing. If there was maybe 1, I could have done something. And a philanthropist friend of mine told me this, that when you put these big numbers, you're not doing yourself a service. You have to put one face. That's why I put that face. You have to put one face. You have to put one person. And maybe the way to understand the 15 million or the 10 million children is to think of each of them as a single child. Because a single child we can do something about. A single child we can make a difference in. The good news, if there's any good news in the flood, is that these are children who are still alive. There are many of them who are at risk, and therefore what we do today can make a difference. Many of them, had the flood not happened, would have lived lives of immense poverty. But we can make a difference in their lives. We can change the pictures that we talk about to the pictures like this, the pictures that are bright, the pictures that are of the future. Let me make only one very short political point here. Most of you, all of you, I assume, follow the politics of the region. It is not a very pretty politics. The Pakistan of today is defined not by the Taliban, not by 9/11, not by the US wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, not by the extremism, not by the PPP, not by the PML, not by the politics. The Pakistan of today are defined by the children who grew up in the camps during the first Afghanistan war. The Pakistan of today are defined by the children whose memories are the memories of abandonment by the international community. The Pakistan of tomorrow will be defined by the 10 million children that this campaign is about. Whether you like it or not, they will leave with memories that will never go away. The memories of homelessness, the memory of being without food, the memory of being without water, and in that memory, you and I can make a difference by either changing that memory to a memory that is about the world reaching out and holding their hand and saying, we are with you, or letting it be a memory of a battle. And that really is the challenge of the 10 million children. That really is what the 3.5 million amongst them who are at risk are seeking. That really is what we are talking about here. Again, as I said, if we can quickly go through the slides because I want to wrap up. This is the 3.5 million who are without homes. Of those 3.5 million, there are 1.75 million who are being held by the relief. And the question there is what happens to the others. One of the other ways that this affects you, why would all of you be concerned that 1.75 million acres of agricultural land is now out of production and affected? I don't know, this is a very well-dressed crowd, so none of you are probably thinking of blue jeans right now. But if I can give you a piece of advice, if you are planning to buy blue jeans, please do so this Christmas season. Because next year the price will go up. This is not me, this is Levi's. If you read the latest report. Why? Because the world's second largest producer of cotton just got hit by a massive flood. There's going to be less cotton in the market next year, and because of that, Levi's says their jeans prices will go up. Again, only trying to point out how this affects each one of us. I want to wrap up there. If you can go just 2 slides, and then I want to end. We can talk about many numbers. We can talk about the numbers of money that has been pledged. We can talk about the amount of money that is needed. We can talk about the disease. We can talk about the death. We can talk about all sorts of numbers, and numbers, at least in my world, count. There are indeed all sorts of numbers. There are numbers of people homeless. There are numbers of people who are going back and finding that their homes are no longer there. There are numbers of people who are without fresh water. There are a number of people who are at risk of disease. But at this moment, as we sit here, I would posit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that there is one and only one number that counts beyond every other number that there is. If you want to understand what this is about, there's only one number that counts, and that number is one. Because that one is you, and that one is me. And the magic of one happens when the one turns into everyone. The magic of one happens when the word one turns into everyone. Each one of us has within our power to change the life of one of those children. And as I have posited to you, you change the life of one of those 10 million children, one of those 15 million children, and you will have a hand in making a better future, not just for Pakistan, but I would posit to you for the country, for the region, and possibly for the world. Thank you so much, everybody.
I picture you in the sun, wondering what went wrong, and falling down